Be sure to subscribe to the Healthcare Security Cast so you don't miss a single episode. We're on multiple platforms, including Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, and Audible, just about anywhere where you can listen to a podcast. For links to all of these sites, for links to join the Healthcare Security Cast community groups on LinkedIn and Facebook, or if you're interested in being a guest or being a sponsor, you can find all of this through one link. Check out our link tree at linktree/Brian Hamilton. That's linktr.ee/Brian, B-R-I-N-E, Hamilton. Again, that's linktr.ee/Brian Hamilton. And before we get into the show, I just want to thank our sponsors, 3D Network Technology. Reliability is our core value. Visit 3dnetworktechnology.com. And Genetech, delivering security strategies for healthcare. Visit Genetech, that's GENETEC.com. And also the Change Execution Group and 360 Life Transformations. Visit 360lifetransformations.com.
Welcome to the Healthcare Security Cast, the podcast dedicated to healthcare security, safety, and emergency management. If you are involved with a healthcare security program or desire to be, this podcast is for you. Join the conversation as we discuss the issues that matter to healthcare security professionals while leveraging the expertise of healthcare security thought leaders and experts in personal development. And now, here's your host, Brian Hamilton.
Welcome to the Healthcare Security Cast for Tuesday, February the 2nd. I'm joined today by David LaRose. Dave, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, Brian, absolutely my pleasure.
I know you fairly well, but for those who don't know you, who is David LaRose?
My professional career started back in the early 80s in law enforcement, and I was fortunate enough to serve in law enforcement for about 20 years. Had a remarkable opportunity and met a remarkable gentleman in his organization and was introduced into healthcare. So obviously, everybody knows Tony York. So Tony introduced me to healthcare, brought me on board, and really was a fantastic mentor. And I grew through that. And by the end of the 2000s, I was fortunate enough to move up to some of the security director roles and chief security officer roles with a couple of healthcare systems. That's quickly, though, how I got to where I'm at.
Could we do a little bit of a deeper dive in your career and just talk about some of the events that led to you being in the healthcare setting? Like I know you mentioned Tony York there, but if you could elaborate a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I came on board with Tony and HSS and was introduced to healthcare security. So obviously, coming out of law enforcement, there was a transition, and I was able to come in as taking over training and crime prevention, and really got to understand the workings of healthcare, how critical healthcare is to the vitality of a community. Coming from law enforcement, we were often seeing the hospital or taking people to and from that needed care and treatment, but you really didn't understand the culture of healthcare. So I was fortunate to learn from the best how to understand culture and grow through the healthcare side. And then, like I said, I had some opportunities to join some larger systems. And eventually in 2013, I came on board with Lakeland Regional Health System in Lakeland, Florida. And they brought me on as the director of safety, security, emergency management, and parking. So I couldn't put all that on a business card. So I think it just said director of security and safety. And that's where I think another growing opportunity happened. That's where you get the position, and obviously they trust you enough to bring you into the position, but now you have to earn the respect. You have to earn the loyalty. You have to earn the understanding of how you really do function within a healthcare organization at that level. 2018, I was asked to come to Lee Health in Southwest Florida as the system director of public safety. Again, another remarkable opportunity, a great organization, but it allowed me to grow professionally and personally even more than I felt I had done at that time. And then in January of 2020, just prior to COVID, I was asked to go on board with the Enterprise Security Risk Group as a principal consultant and handle healthcare for ADT Commercial. And I had a mentor that always said, when a door opens up, if you don't look inside or you don't open the door or don't step inside, you'll never know what's there. So I took the leap of faith from the end user to now the provider. So it's been an awesome journey, awesome career. And now I just keep learning from others such as you and all your fantastic podcast folks that you've had on, and and everybody I really come across. I always try to leave with some type of a learning experience. Obviously, I would be remiss if I didn't bring that up. Being introduced to IHSS was probably, if not one of the key factors of my entire healthcare career. From the time I just came on board as a mentor and sat through all the audience for presentations, and then was voluntold I could raise my hand and go on the education council, which was, just fantastic to meet all of those folks. And I think I served on that for 3 or 4 years. Put my hat, my name in the hat for board, and I was elected to secretary several years ago. Served a term and a half, and then I ran for president, and I was just honored to have received the vote as you. Congratulations in your next venture. That I would be serving the organization as one day as the president of the board. So again, there are no words of gratitude that I could even come up other than saying, how thankful I am for that opportunity, and everybody that's touched me personally and professionally through my career, especially with IHSS. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that, Dave. And the one thing that you kind of touched on there was, you mentioned Tony York earlier as one of your mentors. I'm just curious, who are some of the people that you relied upon as mentors, and what are some of the things that you learned from them?
So listening to all your podcast, that's a hard question really to answer, because there are so many names that pop out. There are so many just professional, confident, competent, polite people out there that are in IHSS that I've walked away learning something from. So I don't want to overlook anybody else's name, but obviously I got my start with Tony and his organization. But I can tell you, it's been listening to past presidents. Brian Warren was an awesome person to learn from, and I think many of us have learned that. Sitting on the board, just the people that are within the organization. So I would rather not go down and say, yeah, there's these names, because I'm going to overlook somebody, and I value that relationship and those friendships too much to overlook anybody. So, other than the names I've mentioned, you've been a mentor. Sitting on a council with you, or the guidelines, or if we're at a seminar and anyone's presenting. So mentoring, I'll tell you what I'll do. My first mentor was in law enforcement. So obviously I had a sergeant who I think was the mentor that I will always call upon. And to this day, we still talk. About twice a year, we'll talk. And he's the one that told me, you never get what you don't go for. He's the one that told me, again, if the door opens, it means you need to step inside. You can always come back out, but if you don't step in, So he gave me these the little cliches. But I can remember sitting in, with him, meeting with him at midnight, 2 a.m, after we're slowed down in the city for a coffee break, and just listening to his wisdom of what it's like to be a humanitarian and serve your community. Law enforcement is serving the community. Healthcare is serving the community. So I take everything that, and his name's Paul Schultz. So I'll say that name, Chief Paul Schultz now. But, Paul would just sit there and just give me advice, and he would just do it in such a positive way. Even if he was teaching you a lesson, you didn't walk out like you got in trouble or you just got spanked. You walked out going, wow, this person cares for me. This person's setting out a roadmap for me. This person's giving me really some awesome shoes to follow. And I think, to this day, as I progressed through the ranks and I left law enforcement after 20 some years, and like I said, we talk often now. At least a couple times a year. He'll call when he's on a road trip or something and go, hey, I'm driving across country. What are you doing? And I go, nothing, because I'm going to dedicate my time to just talking to you, because I'm still going to learn from him on the phone. And so that's probably the beginning of the appreciation of mentoring when I was, young and still starting out. And Paul came into my career.
Oh, awesome. And that's a wise decision on your part to kind of limit it and preface it. I got asked this question. I listed a really long list of names, and when I was listening to that interview again, I was thinking I missed a number of people still. It's really impossible to capture everybody who's impacted your career, but thank you for sharing those names with us for sure.
And absolutely. And I want everybody to know right now, I'm just saying thank you. And that when they heard me say thank you, I was thanking them as well. So thank you.
Well played. All right. So for our discussion today, a lot of the focus is going to be on earning the senior leadership support for any security projects that you're taking on. Now, when we spoke prior, you mentioned having a bit of a roadmap of sorts, and by that I mean like beyond the project plan. So to help execute and gain the organizational support. So Can you unpack that for us? When we map out the plan, what are we really focusing on?
So when we did talk, we were sharing conversation, and I said, this is some of the, I guess over 2020, some of the questions that I've received, the phone calls I get from people I had the pleasure of either mentoring or leading, and now they're in higher positions, and they would ask me, how did you get the funding? How did you get the approval for this multi-million dollar project? Hey, I tried to do something and they said no, or I thought it was a great idea. I'm sitting in front of them all and they just shot me right out of the room. And I said, well, let's talk about this. Let's break this down. Did you really have a plan? I learned the hard way. We all do. So there was a mentor somewhere that taught me how to get successfully from the bottom of the idea through the CFO, funding that purchase order. And so I kind of broke it down, and I have kind of an outline, as you might say, that I always share with someone who calls me, or even if I'm back into me being the one presenting something, I look at my own notes, my own outline. And I think what's the most important, what's always has been number one, is you need to embrace the change. You need to embrace it. You need to understand it. And how are you going to manage it? So they brought you on board as whatever the title is to run their security, safety, and a multitude of other things that come with that title, usually for the security director. They already know that you're the best person for them. They brought you to the organization. And now you have these ideas that you want to make to help make it a better place, to help improve. We always go with the right reasons. We just don't know sometimes how to be successful at getting the outcome. And so I've always said, understand your organization. It starts from number one. Who's the organization? And it's not just the person, it's the history, it's the culture, it's all the key players inside, all the stakeholders. And so there's a lot of time I build a relationship. I just go around and I relationship build, because I need to understand if I'm going to ask for a change, who's going to be impacted. And so I try to learn who are those key stakeholders. And another thing that I'll do along the way is I'm never coming in as overwhelmingly negative. I don't come in and say, hey, the sky is falling, or if we don't do this access control or this VMS, or we don't fix our infant protection, we're risking everything, and all this negativity is going to happen. That's not what they want to hear. And frankly, I think it makes you sound less professional, less of the team player that you're supposed to be, less of the leader that you're supposed to be. And so I'll come in already understanding the organization, how it works, and I'll come in showing the positive outcomes that we're going to acquire, that we're going to achieve. So now I'm going to articulate the change. Here's what we're looking at doing, and here's why we should do this. And here are the changes that will happen in a most positive outcome. From the conception of the idea to the go live, along the way, I will show them what's going to happen. And I'll embrace those relationships. And then I'll articulate along the way how our goals are being completed. So what will we accomplish and what will you see? And you have to build that first, embracing management. You have to embrace the change management. So that's my number one, embrace change management. Understand your organization, understand the key stakeholders, and understand how to be successful in articulating your goals and then achieving that goal. So the next one that I would say, and these aren't in any particular order, other than probably, first of all, understand your culture and your organization. So embrace the change. The next one is really communication. And how often have we heard in our professional career, from being the line officer to being the director, a failure is because of a failure of communication. Success is because probably you overwhelmed the communication, or you had these great opportunities to share information and you did it correctly. And so I step back again and I write out on a whiteboard, if I want, I'll put up the word communication. And then I start to think about who are the key stakeholders. So let's say your project's going to impact your emergency department. Well, if you haven't built that relationship with the director of the emergency department, with the nurse supervisor of the emergency department, if you don't understand the throughput process of your emergency department, you don't understand basically the operations day to day of what they do in your emergency department, because you may be in an urban setting, could be in a rural setting, you could be anywhere where you have you see tens of thousands of patients a year in the ED, or you see a couple thousand a year. So first you understand the details of how do you come to these folks now in communication of, this is what the project would be, and this is how it would impact you and this department. And again, keep it positive. So share that information and keep those stakeholders in the loop. It's very important to have them sitting there with you and embracing it. And sometimes it's that person who gets it over the last hurdle, because if you can have the emergency department director on board for this, then you can sit there in a committee meeting and present to the C-suite with her or him sitting there, and they'll also say they support it. And if we have time later, I'll tell you about the emergency department director that was my first. I want to call her my mentor, because she had a great way of just calling me on the phone and going, "Hey," with that Southern accent. She'd go, "Hey." I go, "What's up?" And she goes, "I just think you need to know this." And she always was there to support me.
Yeah.
She would call me and go, "I think you need to be aware of this." And so I never fell off the cliff because I had a relationship with this fantastic person. I always try to explain and clearly show, not only how is the technology going to come on board, but what value will it bring and what will be the improvements out, what are the outcomes? So again, whether if it's an access system, a BMS system, if it's a patient monitoring system, I know we're all in healthcare. So just think about any healthcare system you want to bring on board. If you are the champion of that cause, then you need to be able to explain it and clearly show the positive outcomes that you're going to achieve. And another thing I would say to the communication is make sure you have the right people on your team. I'm never afraid to ask for help. I don't have to know everything about everything. I always looked at it as I'm the one who has the honor and the pleasure of leading this department, but you have all the talent in the department. So as long as you can help them be successful, then I'll be successful, and so will this outcome. So if I was going after technology, I was always blessed to have a very knowledgeable security director on my team that was my technology expert. And I would have that person now talking the technology, because I don't want to go to a meeting and say something incorrect and then the CIO knows I don't know what I'm talking about. See, so that's not going to be a great way to communicate this project. And I know my audience. So when I'm communicating, I always know who I'm talking to. Is this just going to a general department meeting? Did I step into a nurse briefing in the hallway? Did I ask for time in front of a director? Am I sitting in front of the chief human resource officer explaining what the project's going to be? And yes, why I would suggest moving badging back to public safety. So I always need to know who my audience is, and I structure my comments and my presentation to that person's oversight. What do they do? What do they see? What are they responsible for? You need to make sure you show them the communication that you are structured around the organizational mission, the operational outcomes, its strategies. What is its strategic plan? So if I'm going to come and say, again, I'd like this technology improvement, this $5 million improvement in access control, but here's how I'm going to affect the operational outcome of our organization. And that, I think, is key. Again, understanding and communication, how you get that word across. And I always try to show the value. I will communicate the value of what this is going to bring to the enterprise. And I use the word enterprise because it's not just one department. It's usually not just one floor of the system. It's not one building. Look at it as an enterprise. It may go into one location today, but it can be expanded to maybe your community outreach programs, where those locations are at, or your standalone urgent cares. So today we might be putting it, the head end is going to go into this building, but in 2 years, I can push it all the way out to here, or I can bring it to everybody within the organization. So really, communication was one of my key points that I spent a lot of time on. So I embrace change, communicate it effectively, and then again, along that way, before you can do all this, you have to identify and build those relationships, the stakeholders. So I've kind of touched on this already, but I always make sure that is one of my bullet points on my whiteboard, that who are the stakeholders and did I identify them? And the reason that I would say that is because if you were to negatively impact throughput, that could be a problem. That's a patient experience problem, right? That could be a safety problem. So it may not be the director I need to talk to. It may be somebody in patient throughput that I need to go talk to. And their title may not be director. It may be, supervisor, manager, but they have a key responsibility, in the organization. And I can't afford to not include them as a stakeholder. I brought up badging a little while ago. There are some organizations where badging lies with public safety. There are other organizations where it lies with HR. There are others where it lies with some back office called onboarding. And, that person takes your picture, creates your ID badge, puts you in the system the same way they've been doing for the last 20 years. And that's the process. But there's a lot of knowledge there to learn from. And so I include that person. Why was it done this way? How did it come to be this way? I learn sometimes from the administrative assistants to the chief executive officers. So I'll build a relationship with the chief executive of the chief operating officer, because sometimes I can just call and get a question answered and not have to bother the COO. And so there are people that you have to identify as stakeholders that can also bring a relationship to the success of the outcome. Who are the C-suites that you should be going after? Because you don't need to bother, say, the chief human resource officer if really all you're looking at is you're going to add a VMS system. I try not to bother somebody I don't need to bother, but then I try to bother those that I really do need to bring on board with my plan. So no matter what, I walk in and I go, "Hi, I'm here to bother you today," and I try to bring a sense of humor and enlightenment. Even with my conversation with you, sometimes we get overwhelmed in the stress and what this project really does to us. And this morning my commute was overwhelming. It took me 30 seconds to go from the kitchen to my office, but I had a blowout. I blew out my flip flop, so now I got to say goodbye to an old pair of friends. But getting back into this, I think one of the things that popped in my mind there while I was on a commercial break for a second was the marketing department. Many of us overlook our marketing department. And so when I was trying to bring in new infant protection, I went to marketing and said, how can we market this? How could this be an enhancement to not only our brand, but our safety message? How do I show the value to the staff? Because if you're going to bring in a new infant protection system, the nurses may have to go through new training. Who wants to go through more training? They're already overwhelmed with all the required training, right? All the regulatory training. And now I'm saying, hey, I need you to go through this training. So there's a way to market that. And I always call it the wow factor. Have someone help you make your presentation even better than it is. So when you walk out, they go, wow, that was great. I've had marketing write my speech because, again, I know what I want to say, but I don't always say it the way I'm supposed to. And I'll overlook something. And so I'll get someone to sit down and talk with me on how do I say this correctly. It takes a long time to learn that, if you start to mention patient quality care, there's some keywords, or patient safety, or, I understand our strategic plan and here's our outcomes and community, what's our community reach program? Oh, how did you know that? Because I did my research. Really identify those stakeholders, build the relationships. And then again, as I'm talking, you probably have already heard that you have to embrace the change, but you also have to champion the cause. So another one of my bold points up on the board will be champion the cause. And I'll remind myself, I'll always put up there, be patient, and I'll circle that. And sometimes I have to go up and put another circle around it because something got delayed, but I know that I'm just telling myself, be patient. Change comes over time, and sometimes it takes a lot of time to make some change. And so I'll put up there, champion the cause, be patient. Flexibility is key. If there's a director out there right now or a security manager that is not flexible, and I'm not talking about, bending over at the knees, I'm talking about being able to put your timeline somewhere else. I'm talking about, hey, what was gung-ho today is now going to be shifted to on the back burner because a priority just came up. COVID just came up. Where did all the resources just go to? These conversations we're all sharing on our committee calls, or we're sharing with just our friends, on in communication and still see each other through the video. We'll talk about flexibility. Now you're not going to get anything because probably everything that was going to be put into change that had a cost factor is being frozen and they're going to be reassessed. So you may have lost the funding, or they may have said, hey, you need to move this to 2021. In 2020, we're not doing anything because we're in a whirlwind right now with how we're going to treat the pandemic. So that's been a lot of my conversations with my colleagues and friends. And it's positive. It's hard to always be positive. I think it's hard to be positive every day. I mean, there are some people that are just, to me, are just too happy. So I try to hang out with them more often. But you have to be positive. I wasn't told no. I was told, hey, something came up. Well, how do I help them get through what came up so that then they can come back and say, okay, you can go forward now. Be patient, be flexible, be positive. And then lastly, just be prepared. Be prepared for the unexpected. Be prepared for the expected. None of us are going to come up with a pandemic, but if you don't have a plan and you're not thinking what could impact my plan, well, how about some kind of a community disaster? How about some type of just a weather outcome we didn't think about? How about a facility failure somewhere? So as you're putting that plan together, just think about how you're going to champion the cause and think to yourself, what am I going to do when something isn't moving as fast as I want it to? How do I either impact that or redirect it? And be flexible, be positive, be prepared. And then really, as I'm moving forward, now is the time to ask for the money, right? If you don't ask for it, you can't get it. And how often people have said in our careers, yours and mine, if you didn't mention something, how can I read your mind? If you didn't come to me and say, this is what you brought me on board for, and I did all these assessments and I've done all these interviews and I've identified this need for improvement and we're doing a great job today, but man, we can even be better tomorrow. And I can help our enterprise technology and I can co-chair this, or I can collaborate with the chief technology officer because they're looking to do something and I'm looking to do something. So we're going to join some energy here. We're going to join some resources here. We're going to knock out two things at the same time. And then it's the time to sit there and say, and guess what? We need the funding. And so I'm sitting in front of you, Mr. Chief Financial Officer, asking for, and then you put the dollar amount in there. But then again, you've been prepared to get there. So you have the whole plan to lay in front of this person. You have the whole, initiative of the project, who the stakeholders are, what are the outcomes, when will you be able to show deliverable outcomes, what's your roadmap, and at the end of the project, what's the outcome going to be for the enterprise? When you ask for the money for the CFO, you need to know your CFO. So how does this person expect you to present that request? Do you need to put the plan in front of them and give them time to look at it? Or do you say, here's what we're going to do. It's laid out for you right here. I'll walk you through it and then ask for the money. I don't just go in and say, hey, how's your day? Can I have $2.5 million? Can I have $7 million? They know you're not kidding. And then they know that, you don't know what you're talking about. I go in and I have all my ducks in a row. I have my plan. I have my project. I have all my stakeholders. And if I need to take anybody on the team with me to be on the bench in case he asks it or she asks a technical question, those players are on my bench sitting with me. And then I ask for the money.
That's awesome. Now, I could really and truly end the podcast right now, and I think everybody got a lot of value from that one answer. But of course, I'm not going to do that. I have a number of follow-up questions that I want to run through with you. I want to highlight a couple of things that you said there too. You actually really reminded me of something my father used to say all the time, and his advice that I've kind of held near and dear, where he said to me, if you don't ask, the answer is always no. And that was kind of how you wrapped up that answer. And then the second thing you mentioned was, not making people read your mind. Because another thing he used to always say this to my mom was, I failed mind reading in kindergarten and I haven't tried it since. So it's, kind of that same idea. You want to make sure that you're being understood. And another thing that you mentioned there kind of early on was the whole idea of being that security director, but not wanting to be the holder of all of the information and leveraging your whole team really. And I think that's kind of a hang up for a lot of people. And I just want people to think about this as well. When you go to a physician, if you have a problem that they don't have an answer to, they're going to refer you to another physician. So as a security director, you shouldn't feel any shame in not holding every single piece of information. Obviously, you need to have a good understanding of everything, but you have your experts that you bring on your team for a reason. So I think that's a great point that you made there, Dave, to really leverage all of those folks as well.
And you'll find that goes likewise with other folks that are trying to do a project. All of a sudden, the director of pharmacy will come to you and say, I'm trying to do this new plan here, and there's kind of a security role to it. Would you co-chair this with me, or may I present my opportunity to you? And if you like it, would you at least be one of the stakeholders that would help me through the process? Even though I built relationships with them for my projects, it was great to see someone say, hey, you have a few minutes, and knock on my door and go, I'd like to talk to you about how I'm going to secure my med rooms, what technology I'd like to put in the med room. But it's a security factor there. So I would like to have you engage from the start to the finish. And I'd go, absolutely, sit down. Let's have a cup of coffee and work this one through.
Awesome. Now, another thing that you mentioned there that was obviously a really important piece of this is the relationship building. Now, and I think there's a lot of people probably listening who are in a similar boat to you. Maybe they made a transition from another sector to healthcare. And for anybody who's in that boat, kind of a general rule, who are some of the, when you look at different roles and responsibilities in the healthcare organization, who are some of those key stakeholders that you want to really engage in and focus on building those relationships with?
Again, not to overlook any particular department or person.
Of course.
I think in healthcare, as the director of, say, security, safety, whatever, all those other duties are assigned to you, is you need to understand and who are also in charge of the other key operations of the system. So it was just as important for me to have a relation with the director of environmental services, because if that person's not on board and yet their staff are 24/7, 365 knowing and seeing and operating within the system, the hospital, I may have a negative impact or I could show a positive outcome. And so it's not so much title, it's who's over what responsibilities. So environmental services, facilities leaders, you can only imagine some of the nightmares they have at night, knowing that, what if this fails? What if that fails? What if, do we do this correctly? Do we not do that correctly? So I really tried to build those relationships with, who's over the actual facility, who's running the interior and the internal day-to-day operations that are affecting the patients, that are affecting staff. People often overlook dietary. I go right to the director of food service because the loading docks, you're trying to secure the loading docks. Well, these people might be taking deliveries at 4 or 5 in the morning from a semi, and I'm looking at putting a gate arm out and another barrier. And so you have to really think about, who am I impacting? And you could be doing something with your parking, and now you're impacting your patients. So I'll go to volunteer services, find out who's over volunteer services, and say, what's often the biggest complaint from people coming in and checking in with your staff? Not enough handicap parking. Really? Have you ever gone out and studied your handicap parking? Depending again on the size of your organization, meeting the ADA requirements is you have to, right? But you may need to really look at, can we exceed these, because a large percentage of our patients are handicapped and they need access mobility. So, I've done that just in building parking structures. Yeah, we put all the emphasis in providing parking spaces, but did we really go in and put emphasis in putting as many handicap accessible spaces as close to the elevators as possible, for a high percentage of our patients? And so it's great to always build those relationships. So again, don't overlook dietary, don't overlook facilities, environmental services, don't overlook the volunteers. You're going to put in a visitor management solution. Who's running it right now? In a lot of organizations, it's the volunteers. So you're having to understand, why are they there? And some of them fantastic people have been there for 10, 15, 20 years or longer, volunteering their time. And so understand, what they're using and why they use it, and will they be open to change, and how will you bring change to them in a positive way? I don't overlook anybody, Brian. That's why I said it's when you said, who do you really want to seek out? You need to seek out everybody. If you have a special floor, maybe you have a hospice floor, maybe you have a head injury floor. I always seek out who's over the intensive care unit. I mean, that unit cannot have negative outcomes, especially that we created with with internal barriers. They have a code. I had to have a system that's in place that understood how their physicians are moving, how their nurses are moving, how the support equipment's coming in from other parts of the hospital. So there's a lot to this that you really have to consider and be engaged in with building those relations.
Absolutely. Now, another thing that we had discussed before was the idea of your projects kind of branching off and factoring in other departments and some of the things that may be helpful to them. And this is just another great way to get support for your project and really benefit the facility overall. Could you discuss that a little bit? And even if you have some examples that you could share to really drive it home for people.
I'll just go to an access project. So you have an end-of-life access control system, VMS system, right? You have an end of life, and you're already experiencing failures, system-wide failures. So sure, the outcome objective is going to be bringing in the enterprise solution for access control VMS platforms. But when I went and met with, say, the CIO, the CTO, CSO, whatever you call your technology leaders, they're looking at other things, such as how are they handling their electronic patient records, right? How are they handling all of their HIPAA protection, cybersecurity, all these other things that I don't want to be the expert in. That's why there's somebody on my team that I can ask those questions about. But what I needed to ask them was, if I'm successful and we are successful in putting in new access control, what type of infrastructure do we have? Where would I need it to attach to? Are you okay with us doing some type of remediation in your technology closets? Did you have a project you wanted to do? Oh yeah, we were looking at putting on whatever in our technology closets. Well, what if I put that into my project? What if I help the improvements into my project? I'll put card readers on the doors, where right now you have a key, and we all know key management is very difficult. You don't have any type of motion sensors inside or heat monitoring inside. So what if I put that into my project? What if we do some cable remediation while we're up there in the ceiling? You ever want to be overwhelmed? Just put your head above the ceiling tiles sometime and just look at that. Sometimes they're really amazing on the racetracks. I mean, they're all color coded and really nice and banded together. And other times it looks like a bunch of spaghetti up there. It just went every which way because the bowl got knocked over. So I'll get with facilities and say, if we're up there and we see maybe there's a firewall that's been improperly fire cocked, the caulking isn't there anymore, or they never did it. We'll catch that and we'll do that for you. So, the technology officer is a big one, and ask them that if they don't need to be the one that's championing it for you. Ask them who you can now work with. Who could they assign to you as the representative of the IT side? And that's what we would do. That's what I did. We looked at, okay, we're going to come in with a whole new technology. We have an end-of-life system. We might as well do some remediation while we're up in the ceiling. We're going to help facilities with any fire code caulking or anything that needs to be repaired up there. We'll take care of it. We're already up there. Here's the infrastructure, and IT is asking that we also make sure that their closets are on their own access. We put in some motion camera inside. We can put some heat monitors inside, things of that nature for them. And then at the end of the day, we're going to push all that to their monitoring station, so they could be sitting somewhere and pull up if something goes wrong. That's an example of who I would go build that relationship with, and how I would say, can my project bring you any positive outcome? Is there something I can do for you?
That's awesome stuff. Now, I want to circle back to your career again. Now, you're making this transition from an end user to a consultant. Can you share with us what's involved in that transition, and some of the things that might be helpful to anybody who's thinking of doing the same?
A lot of just trust in not only yourself, how you got where you're at, and why is somebody asking you to come to that position. I can't tell you how many of my friends, mentors, IHSS that I called and said, this is me, me, be candid with me. This is an opportunity. You think I would be good at it? Do you think I'd be successful? You have to put a lot of faith and trust in yourself, seek out other, opinions that you trust. And so I went to some of those folks that we all know. I mean, you have to look at who's done it. I didn't create something new. I'm following in footsteps of many before me that have been, the leaders. And so I made those phone calls and had those candid conversations. And I appreciate it when we have kind of the old whiteboard. I had one side that said positive, one side that said negative. And I even trusted in my family. My wife, I shared it with her, and I said, what do you think? And at the end of the day, she's never going to say I wouldn't, support you in anything. It's the fact of how she laid it out for me to understand. Go for it. You got to this level, and this is something that you will regret if you never try, or are you happy doing what you're doing? And so there's a lot of thought has to go into it. Trust me. I sat out in the man cave many nights. That's my garage for code. Just sat there and would just let my mind think about all the, the positives, the negatives. And then eventually I came to a decision and said, you know what, I'm going to give it a shot. And now I'm so grateful that I did.
Excellent. And looking back to your career in law enforcement, and then you made that transition to healthcare security. What are some of the things that factor into that? Like, is there anything that transfers well to healthcare versus things that you had to learn?
I think there's a lot that transfers consistently, from one career to the other. And then there are some things you have to really you got to put those aside. I mean, to start out with, law enforcement officers and healthcare workers are all humanitarians. We all want to give to our community. We all take pride in serving. And so you already know that you come from the same side of the fence. You are there to help society. You are there because you like people. You want to take care of people. You want to protect people. So that was easy in a concept. If you're sitting in front of an oral board, it's easy then to present that concept. I can defend that. You have to remember, when you transition from law enforcement to healthcare, you're no longer the authority that you were when you could say, I swore an oath and this badge on my chest says I can now interrupt your liberties. I can now make and force you into an outcome based upon your behavior. In healthcare, It's about the patient. It's about patient safety. It's about patient quality outcomes. Yes, we're there to protect the staff, but the use of force is still, there's something we discuss. I mean, look how many times you and I have been in conversations with others over, use of force and what's appropriate and not appropriate. And, and in healthcare, do you go armed, unarmed? Do you give them intermediate weapons? Do you not? And so you really have to understand now you've gone from being the enforcer to the protector. You're now a care provider. You're on the protective side of care, not the enforcement side of rules and laws and things of that nature. And so it's not to put somebody in jail and punish them. It's to say, are you responsible for your behavioral outburst? But now how do I control that? And I do it in a humanitarian way. I do it in a healthcare way. And so that's when that you really have to sit back and understand, can I make that transition? Can I take the standing there and letting somebody unload their thoughts on me and know that, okay, I'm okay with it. And I'm going to walk out of the patient's room and say, I did my best. And I hope that I was able to comfort them somewhat compared to telling that person to turn around and put their hands behind their back because they're going to jail. So use of force is something that you really need to understand. And you have to do that in your own soul searching. Are you willing to do that? I think you're consistent in understanding that, healthcare is regulated, law enforcement's regulated. So it's okay. You can talk to the understanding that there's a structure, there are rules, there are internal mechanisms of operation that you have to follow. There's chain of command. You should understand that already. You just have to now seek out who you answer to directly and who you have a collaborative relationship with to answer to. The image factor, I always think that law enforcement and healthcare security have to always present the highest of integrity, the highest standard of professionalism. So, you wore a uniform all those years. Now you should be comfortable in street clothes if you've never done that, and come to work looking the part. Every day it was a suit and tie kind of thing at a certain level. But again, it's because of that image that you are there to be the leader. And so you should present that to the person you're standing in front of. And so there's a lot of things I can think about sitting in a radio car and probably visualize what I've been doing now the last 20 years. And there was a lot of consistencies, constantly going through training, constantly understanding changes in strategic outcomes. Where are we focusing? In law enforcement, it may have been focusing on community policing. And in healthcare, it's focusing on patient safety and patient quality care and patient outcomes. And I think it's a great transition, especially for somebody who's looking to go either from law enforcement to healthcare or healthcare to law enforcement. I've been honored to have many security officers that I can think of in my head right now that have successfully moved to law enforcement. And they'll give you a call and go, I got the job. They're so happy and excited. And it's like, I know you do good at it because you come from a very, I think, compassionate background now, and you're going to go into law enforcement. And I think you'll be great coming from law enforcement into healthcare, as long as you don't forget it's all about people. You're a humanitarian, and you are there to protect the patient now. You're there to protect the system. You're not there to really be the enforcer. There's not a lot we enforce. We just try to protect workplace violence. We try to protect from damage and abuse of our equipment and things of that nature, theft, those kind of things. But you're bringing back memories, because I'm looking at my wall, and I have my shadow boxes on the wall, and my badges are up there. And then I have, when I was IHSS president, I have a photo up there of me behind the podium, and I'm looking. There was a transition there, so embrace it, and identify those mentors.
Absolutely. Now, we've hit on a lot of different topics here, and I think we've covered some great stuff. Is there anything I haven't asked you yet that you would like to discuss further?
No, I think your questions and our dialogue, the way it's gone, is great. I mean, I know a lot of people ask me if I'm better looking than Martin Green and younger than Ben Scaglione, or if I'm better looking than Ben Scaglione and younger than Martin Green. So, I had to get the pun out to my friends out there. So, no, I just hope that whatever I had to say was beneficial. I hope that along the way someone will say, "Hey, thanks. I appreciated you sharing. It helped me in some way." And that's why I always tune in on whoever you have on your podcast, because I learn from everybody. You've had some fantastic people on from day one. So whether if you're bringing in a director or you're bringing in somebody that's specialized service, or someone who's been successful in bringing in new technology, or how did they get through the COVID pandemic screening process, or how did they become a distinguished department? We see that come across on the emails and LinkedIn's, and I'm going like, awesome, man, because that's hard. So, those are really the something else I just do every day. I look for those things that come across the healthcare network or come across LinkedIn of all of our colleagues, and they're celebrating some kind of an occasion. Somebody got their CHPA, or somebody got their distinguished department award, or somebody took a different position, and now they're calling you saying, hey, any advice?
Excellent. And one thing that I forgot to mention actually was I did let Martin know that you're going to be on the podcast, and he did say for every time you mention his name, he owes you a adult beverage. So he just remind him that he owes you an adult beverage for that unplanned shout
So
out.
I know people can't see us, right? Because obviously we're not doing the video, but hang on just a second. I want you to be able to tell Martin Green, what did I just wave in front of the video?
There we go. That is the Canadian flag.
Martin gave us to us years ago, and I always kept the American flag, the U.S. flag, and the Canadian flag on my desk. And people would ask me, why the Canadian flag? And I said, because once you've had a Canadian friend, you never can stop. They're just a great, they're just always fantastic. And so it's just a joke, because he doesn't think anybody will keep, these little trinkets he gives us. But I actually have a shelf dedicated to all the Canadian trinkets that Martin Green has given me.
Yeah, I even have the Inukshuk on my desk as well. So
I remember carrying that around. Nobody understands when you hand them that suitcase with that in it, why it weighed so much. Oh my God.
Yeah, I have the smaller version. I guess I may get my hands on the full size one next year, but we'll see.
It's the only thing you put in your backpack. So it's like, why does your backpack weigh so much? I don't know how to explain it to you. TSA says, open up your backpack. And I said, you sure you want me to?
Oh man, awesome stuff. Now, what can we look forward to from you in the future, David?
For me, I'm just going to embrace 2021. You know what? I'm going to embrace things in a positive way, as I hope I can. Not let the things I can't control bring me down. I'm looking forward to, again, the opportunity to catch up with everybody, but where we can shake hands and have that adult beverage that Martin's going to owe me. And I think is that 6 of them now? And then, really just keep the relationships going. It's hard on video all the time, right? It's hard. I mean, you and I are looking at each other, and yet it's nothing better than sitting there and shaking a hand and having a meal before a seminar or something together. So I'm going to hope that comes back to us, and I'll embrace that. But otherwise, I'm just going to embrace, how can I be successful? How can I help others? And really, how can I get to the next year? So I thank you for this opportunity, and just a time to just talk and put work beside me for a little while. It's great to just have a conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I always enjoy the conversations with you as well. As we're wrapping up here, do you have a special message for the Healthcare Security Cast community?
I would say, we should all come together and applaud you, Brian. This has been a great platform. So one, thank you for what you do. As I said, I look forward to all of these, because I put them on while I'm working, and I find myself sometimes I put the work aside, and then I'll focus on who you have speaking, because it's a nice exchange. So I would say embrace the platforms of communication. Stay in touch with your friends, your colleagues. Be sure that you're supporting IHSS and everything else that we do, and giving back to the community, and just stay positive.
Excellent. Now, you alluded to staying in touch. What's the best way to connect with you?
They can reach me through LinkedIn. That's perfect. My email is my name, so it's davidlarose@adt.com. You're welcome to send me something through my work email. Those that are not on my do not disturb list have my phone number. But if you just want to click me either through IHSS or LinkedIn, I have those popped up all day, every day, because again, I'm watching all the stuff coming through and learning every day from everybody else sharing information. So
awesome stuff. Well, thank you very much again for joining us today. I appreciate it, and I know this was going to add a lot of value for a lot of people.
My pleasure, my privilege. I thank you, and hey, Martin, have a great day.
And this concludes another episode of the Healthcare Security Cast. Join us next time as we're joined by Eloise Gagnon, discussing the importance and process of goal setting. We're a month into 2021, and if your resolutions have fallen off, this is the podcast episode that you need to listen to get yourself back on track. And join us again next week as we discuss the process of starting a healthcare security program from scratch with Jeff Hogan. The Healthcare Security Cast is available on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music and Audible, and many other platforms as well. Check out our link tree on your computer or mobile device. And this can be found at linktree/Brian Hamilton. That's linktr.ee/Brian, BRINE, Hamilton. Again, that's linktr.ee/Brian Hamilton. Or if it's easier, send me a text at 647-372-2042. That's 647-372-2042. And I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have or share any links you may be looking for. Thanks again for listening. Until next time, take care and stay safe.